Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. Too bad we can't see the visual behind me. It's a Trump lost LOL flag that is currently flying in my neighborhood, believe it or not.
What we can see, though, is all we can see behind your head is Trump. We can't read anything else. So it looks like you are, there you go, full Trump support mode this morning.
Yeah, that is a bad visual.
With your Biden aviators. What happened to the sombrero?
That's right. Well, just for the sake of documentation, we can't really see it because of this stupid thing there.
No, it looks good, man.
There you go. That's all you're going to get of it.
I think that we should update your profile picture. That's pretty rad.
That's a good sombrero. My niece has got that for me in Mexico.
Yeah, it looks official.
It does. All right, let me get rid of this, man.
No, leave your Trump logo up. It looks good on you.
Are you sure? Okay. I might have to move over. So here we are.
That's in your neighborhood?
Yeah, so I was telling you off the air, I'll just tell you real quick. This is one of my neighbors. He lives on a corner. He has had this sign up since shortly after the election. Prior to that, during the election time, he had a Black Lives Matter flag up. And I think he had a Biden-Harris flag as well. And so his neighbor's not too happy. I saw a TikTok with him on it where he showed a note from his neighbors saying, hey, since you weren't our favorite neighbor to begin with,
that's rad.
We are not very happy with your flag. And so he went on TikTok, made a video, said, hey, showed everybody the note, read it out loud, and then says, hey, because you like my Trump flag so much, I'm going on the internet. I'm going to buy every Trump lost LOL flag and Black Lives Matter flag I can. And he's currently flying an additional Black Lives Matter flag right over here, right over on the right of this. So
I have to admit, that is the first time I've seen one of the Trump lost LOL flags. Is that a thing?
Oh, it's a thing.
Okay,
oh, yeah. I mean, they're on the internet. They're getting around. Sometimes people will take this flag, put it on the side of their car, open the front and back door, and then stick the corners into the door and then close it and then drive around with it like that. Right?
Now, is it possible? Because Trump, of all things, he ran on a promise that he was a businessman and he knew how to, generate money. Is it possible that Trump is behind these Trump lost LOL flags and he's raking in the money?
In the spirit of healing and unity that is so prevalent today, I'm just going to say, yeah, sure, it's possible.
Do you feel like there's more unity and healing today? We're one day away from the historic inauguration of Grandpa Biden and the removal of Trump, and we're a week past. I think it's been a week. We're a week past Insurrection Wednesday, as it will become to be known. So do we feel more unity?
On the side,
you seem more calm.
Yeah. On the Biden side, Biden-Harris side of this equation, I think when they talk about unity and healing, I think it's sincere, and it would be it's sincere, if not, maybe not altruistic. I mean, they need this. They need this stuff to. They need this stuff to move forward with their agenda, right? Mm-hmm. So that's probably not altruistic. On the other side, though, when you hear the during the vote to impeach, when you heard the Republican members of the Congress stand up and talk about unity and healing, how the impeachment was not going to promote unity and healing. You have to understand that when Republicans say that in a setting like that, what it really means is, hey, stop looking at my past record. Let's move forward so I can get away with the horseshit that I just did. And because, the only ones that said that were the ones that didn't want anybody to look too close at their at how they voted on the objection, or did they make objections to the counting the electoral votes later the night of Insurrection Wednesday? Yeah, they did. And so 201, every one of them stood up and said, oh, it's time to move on. We should heal. We should not dwell on the past. Yeah, because your past is going to ruin your political career.
So, and we talked a little bit about this last week as far as the people on Trump's side, the senators, the people in the House who were carrying the torch for him and saying that, there was election fraud and this will, the proof will come out and all of that. And, now I think, like you said, most of those people are trying to shed that position from their name. And now we have Rudy Giuliani, who's saying he's not going to represent Trump in the impeachment case. I don't know who this new lawyer is, but I saw a clip earlier a couple of days ago about, again, more information is going to come out. We believe that the election was stolen, and we have the proof. Well, I mean, this isn't Perry Mason that you saved the proof for your day in court, and then all of a sudden you drop the bomb. Where's the fucking proof?
Right.
I mean,
right.
How come they just keep teasing it, and there just is nothing there?
Yeah, look, I'm waiting, open-minded. When I see the proof of the election fraud, then I'll be open to it. I will, but here's what I can say for all those folks, and I know quite a few of them personally. Affidavits are not proof.
Yeah, and that really, I mean, again, we've kind of looked at this from all angles. If there really was something going on here, of course you'd want to know about it. You'd want to get to the bottom of it. If everybody, was a true American and really thought that our country's democracy and our election was in jeopardy or somehow compromised, you would want to know. You would want to treat it with the seriousness that it deserved. But I don't understand what continuing the narrative does. I just don't understand what are people holding on to? What do they hope to accomplish? And maybe what they hope to accomplish was what we ultimately saw a week ago with the insurrection, which I do want to get into a little bit more since there's more details that have come out. But if their ultimate goal was to really just kind of fight with smoke and mirrors until there could be some period where they could gain control by force or whatever, then maybe that's where we are. But other than that, there just doesn't seem to be anything substantive there.
I think that, I think when you look at this closer, and I don't think it's been done yet, really. I mean, we've had a week, and I'm sure some new things have come out. But in this very short time following the insurrection business, I think, probably in the long run, you have to divide these groups up a little bit, right? And I think probably on the screen, I'm looking away from you. Sorry about that. That's the weird reversal thing. I have
No
there.
worries.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to separate the people that are on the Trump side of this equation or the Republicans. I think that, this top layer that we saw, and I guess I'm going to make a few corrections from last week's podcast. Some of my numbers were way the hell off. So that's what I get.
250,000.
Yeah, that's what I get for taking information off of Fox News or something. But so whatever it was, whatever the number was,
and that doesn't take away from their election night coverage.
Right. So this top group, this thousands, tens of thousands, I guess, that stormed the Capitol, and the ones that actually went inside and rummaged through desks and broke doors down and stole stuff and made stupid comments like, "Hey, I guess it's time to form a government now." I mean, some of the shit we've seen on these tapes now has been incredible. I mean, those people they don't have a plan. They just want to, they're like cult members, and they just want to break shit. And that also extends down to a lesser degree through the top strata of Trump supporters, right? That are disaffected white people for the most part, that don't feel like the government has been speaking to them for the last decade or so, and they're frustrated, and now they just want to break stuff. And that's really, their whole plan doesn't really go any farther than that, because there's nobody, I don't care how much you've drank this Kool-Aid, there's nobody that could honestly think they were going to change anything with any. Well,
maybe you're gonna get to this point, but so out of the group of people that were there, what percentage of that population is this group that you're talking about? The people with no plan who just wanted to break shit. The
people that were in the Capitol on Wednesday.
Yeah, is that the smaller of the group? Is that the majority of the group? What do you think?
No, I think all of them want to, but they're at a point where they want to break stuff. I think it's a much smaller number and I don't really know the percentage because I don't really know the numbers. It's not 250,000, so I'm a little lost. It's a much smaller number of people there. I mean, I think that we had hundreds, if not thousands, of people inside the Capitol flooding in through those broken down doors and windows. So let's say it was hundreds, okay, just to keep this in reality. Out of those thousands of people, there were at least many hundreds that were willing to commit crimes, and are so far under the spell of this cult leader that they think he sent them there. Right? They say it to the camera. They're saying
there's
right?
certainly and this is kind of where I want to go with this. There's a large group of people that certainly the audio of those statements are available where they're saying just that he sent us there and we're following his orders. And to me, it almost sounds like they're setting up for their own defense, because for them to say, well, I only did this because I was told to, they somehow think that means they're going to get out of it. I guess. Up until tomorrow morning, I guess they might be thinking that's going to help him get a pardon or something from him, right? I mean, he is flinging the pardons pretty freely, but I don't think he's going to get down into people he doesn't know that were at this stupid protest thing. So do you? I mean, there's we've had a whole week to digest this. What do you think? Do you think that this was people have thrown around the word coup, which to me, it looks like it's short of that. It's not there was not a real attempt to overthrow the government in any meaningful way, I don't think. But was this? Do you think that the intent was to ultimately storm and break into that building, or was it that a gathering and a protest went south, for lack of a better term?
No, 100%. There's all kinds of evidence for planning to, and you actually using the word storm the Capitol. They talked about this extensively on all the platforms before they were thrown off all the platforms.
So is this a faction within the faction, or is this orchestrated at the top? By that I mean, Trump and his, cohorts.
I think that the violence part of this, the storming, breaking the windows, going in and stuff was certainly fomented by Donald Trump. I mean, his words and the things he said in the weeks and months actually leading up to this, where he managed to convince this, and we don't know how many people this is yet, right? I mean, that was only the people that could get there last Wednesday, right? So he has.
You mean there's more in the Trump army that was called to action but couldn't make it there?
Yeah, well, not every militia and white supremacy group in the country was there. A lot of
has
them
the means to travel.
Yeah, none of them have the means to travel now. So I would watch yourself on trains. I don't even know if they're letting them on trains or Ubers or anything. They'll be bicycling to the insurrection, right. The next insurrection. So, yeah, I think, I don't know. You tell me where you're going, and I'll tell you if I'm there, because I might be. My opinions about some of this have shifted a little bit over the last week from more information coming in and stuff, right?
Yeah, well, and I'm just really trying to flesh it out because I'm not necessarily totally up to speed on all the details, but certainly the notion that we need to get to the bottom of this, I'm 100% behind, and we need to find out more. Because as you and I were analyzing it kind of in real time, what we were really looking at is, okay, what was this? This was the crybaby, again, not accepting the election results and appealing to his base and riling people up. And then we watched this violent protest turn into additional crimes, such as, breaking into the Capitol and murdering people. And so we're like, what the fuck is this? Is this something that, Trump is personally responsible for? Immediately the conversation turned to that, for impeachment because he incited this riot. So you have those catchphrase words, the incitement, the impeachment, the insurrection, Trump's culpability. And I guess to me, what I see there is these are all questions that we and I, as an investigator, right, that I need to understand and figure out exactly what happened here. Because I just, you need to know how deep this thing goes. So as we are now another week or so removed from this thing, these details are coming out. And I think what you alluded to as far as these groups that had means of communication, which is whether it was through Parler or Facebook or Twitter, and how much of this was deeply orchestrated, I'm not completely familiar with yet. And so that's why I'm just kind of talking this out loud with you to see what we know. And I think you're right as far as where you were going with this, in the sense that there was certainly a group of people who maybe had this planned all along, that this was their intention. And I just wonder, how deeply that is rooted.
I think that that's going to turn out to be, as always, is going to be compared to the population number. I mean, it's going to be a small amount compared to how many people does it take to throw an insurrection party at any given state capital on any given day. I don't know. I mean, we've been seeing this. We've talked so much during the Trump administration about how he told us who he was. Well, these people have been showing us who they are the whole time. I mean, the nonsense in Michigan, they're going to kidnap the governor, Charleston, just time after time. I mean, we really, this was one of the many dangers that we've faced over the last 4 years with the Trump administration. He belittled and eviscerated the intelligence community, the FBI, everybody that would have been keeping an eye on this. And just for everybody out there, I think everybody knows it is a lot harder to identify, monitor, and go after domestic terrorists than it is terrorists from outside, groups from outside of the country.
What do you mean? Why?
Well, because
of the securities we've put in place and our own private protections.
Yeah, this is the FBI's main job, right? Counterterrorism, and they're running around doing other things and stuff, but they're going to investigate federal crimes. But I mean, their big mandate is counterterrorism, and they are. And I'm not suggesting that we change anything that I'm about to say, but they are forbidden from arbitrarily
everything you
monitoring.
say on this podcast, we're using to set the stage for our new government, for our new country that will ultimately come out of this fucking mess. So you can say whatever you want.
Can I just say that I am not part of the sedition that is being advocated on the part of my esteemed colleague? So the FBI is almost fatally hindered from an effective monitoring of domestic terrorist groups. Now, will that change or not? Who knows? But
don't you think? Because don't you think that that has only been made easier for the FBI to turn over these stones since 9/11? Because really, wasn't that the whole criticism of all the shit that came out of the Patriot Act and, Bush's warmongering machine, was that, we lost certain civil liberties and right to privacy for the sole purpose of tracking down terrorists?
I don't think that much in the way of the prohibitions on FBI investigating U.S. citizens arbitrarily for these purposes changed. I think that certainly most of the restrictions on the international scene, right, trying to monitor speech and telephone calls and things from foreign entities were removed or greatly enhanced their ability to do that. But those were all from outside threats. So we're one of the reasons why we're having this problem. I mean, I think we're going to uncover some incredible incompetency leading up to Insurrection Day, but that investigation's got a ways to go, I think. But in general and going forward, we have some real challenges and we need to be careful, because if there are going to be any changes made to what the FBI or any investigative agency can do in regards to investigating or monitoring U.S. citizens, no matter what their stupid ideas are, we need to be very careful, because this is truly a case where you don't want to flush the baby out with the bathwater.
So let me ask you a question then, because if you're talking about available resources to agencies like the FBI and information that's out there, we've talked about this before as far as these other big tech companies, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, which I'd never even heard of prior to last week,
Right.
which ultimately, big tech corporate America came together, Apple, Google, Amazon Web Services, canceling these people. And so that information was there. It was public. It was published. And so clearly the FBI had the opportunity to monitor some of those conversations because it's not, private. These were group chats, right? And so it took, which I want to get into a little bit, but it took the big tech guys to come together and cancel those people. So where's the FBI's role in all this? Were they not monitoring those conversations? And I said this before, if this gathering was planned sometime in advance, which it was, how could you not anticipate a large gathering of people who were angry coming to Washington, D.C. in that close of proximity to the Capitol and not expect shit to go down?
I think the answer that I've heard to that, I'm not sure if I agree with it or not, but the answer I have heard up until this point is that the biggest reason why they didn't is because it had never happened before. They simply were not imagining this outcome, this potentiality. I mean, no group of Americans, let alone a largely white group of Americans, have ever committed this type of insurrection into the Capitol. So, I think.
How do we know they're all white? We're all covered in fucking face coverings required by our government.
Do you have a television? Yeah, do you have a television? Or sort of the off black guy or the off, Jamaican in there or something. I think there probably was. I think I've seen quite a few videos where there evidently were some number of, I want to get this right, Filipinos in that group, which tend to be highly nationalistic, Republican supporting.
Yeah, I saw some of that information too.
Right. And that's good, but according to the children of those people that I've seen on social media, they tend to be a little bit ill-informed and just sort of, easily swayed by the cult mentality of a Trump or a Duterte or whatever. So I think but I mean, for the most part, this was a huge group of white people, right? The whole Trump base is mostly white people, and the real there is a huge. So look, we need to face up to this and stop sticking our head in the sand. This is the rise of white supremacy groups during the Trump administration, the couple years leading up to it, and going forward, needs to be reckoned with. Because
what do you mean by that? How do we reckon with it?
Well, I mean, the first good thing that's happened is that the web hosting and social media platform providers have realized that what they simply were looking the other way so that they could achieve their numbers. So it's the amount of people that stay on social media platforms and how long they stay on it is all driven by conflict and hate. That's really the main reason. And the only thing that they really have cared about up to this point is the numbers, because that's how they make money, the advertisers, right? So how many people can you keep in front of their screen so they can look at the erectile dysfunction advertising on your website? Okay, so
but I'm really torn on this, because I mean, certainly when these companies launched, whether it was Facebook, Twitter, and again, this is coming from a capitalistic point of view. When they thought of these ideas in their basement, I don't believe that the intention was, hey, we're going to start this platform fueled by hate because therefore that's going to keep people engaged longer and we're going to make a lot of money. I don't think that was the intention. And when these companies are launched, doesn't mean they don't know that or have recognized that as they have evolved and looked at their subscriber base. But
yeah,
I guess
they have recognized as they've gone along, especially over the last few years, that conflict, and I don't think they don't really care what kind. So it could have been any number of things, right?
But isn't that the whole world? Look at the news. I mean, if there's no good news on TV, I don't even watch the goddamn news anymore. It's terrible, but it's all, thunderstorms and fire and murder and all the other. I mean, there's no positive news because nobody would watch it.
Yeah,
And that's been a long time.
My understanding is that for social media platforms and web hosting companies, and the reason why I'm going to keep combining those together is because we need to look at the situation that got Parler taken down, right? So for some of those instances, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, whatever, taking people that they see as dangerous or troublesome off their platform. Parler's whole thing was, hey, we're open. We don't care how dangerous you are. So nobody could depend on Parler to do any kind of monitoring.
Yeah, that was the argument from
right?
Amazon.
Right. And so Amazon's saying, hey, we don't want to sell services to white supremacists. Okay. And you won't monitor your site and take them down. So we're not going to provide you services.
And really the argument was kind of twofold. It wasn't Parler saying, hey, we are monitoring the site. We see what you see, but we want to make sure that we have an open platform. So in other words, they're not acknowledging they didn't see it, right? They're just saying we want to provide an open platform.
Yeah, and I've heard an extensive interview with the guy, from Parler prior to being taken down, and he was kind of like, listen, here's how we deal with that kind of stuff. We have a voluntary jury of subscribers that we bring into the process to make decisions about whether something needs to be taken down. Fuck that. That is just horseshit, right? So that's just him trying to make excuses for why they're not doing what they should be doing. And they're facing the consequences. And here's another thing too. Before anybody goes off on a tangent, and I don't mean you, Travis, but anybody
I'll
listening in their mind, I know you will, but we can depend on you for that, and me for that matter. But before anybody goes off crazy about free speech or how that's not fair, understand that Parler was being web hosted by Amazon and Google, I think. But for sure Amazon, right? And
I
Amazon
think the connection is Amazon was hosting the website, and Google and Apple have in the App Store apps
okay.
to link to Parler. I think that's the connection.
Okay, so just everybody needs to know that there are 6 or 7 other places where Parler can go get hosted.
They're already up.
They might be back up.
They're back up
right?
as of now.
Right. So it was never a matter of, hey, you're being censored, you're being denied service. It's just that everybody they've talked to up until whoever, and I haven't seen the stories on it yet, whoever's host, everybody they went to since they got taken down by Amazon said, we don't want you. We don't want to sell services to domestic terrorists, and you can't make us, And so whoever is doing it now, they're going to suffer. I mean, there's another type of situation for them.
Well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe, they won't suffer because whoever posts them, their entire base is made up of people who are in that group. You only suffer in the whole world of cancel culture. You only suffer when corporate America cancels you because you are viewed to be outside of the narrative of mainstream media. When you have an intersection of, common sense, peaceful citizens who then have to deal with the crazy fucking terrorists on the other side.
Travis, that was awesome. But let me tell you something. Another way to say everything you just said is that when this should strike home for a capitalist, right? When in a capitalist society, when a company decides they don't want to service somebody because they're assholes,
yes,
they stop servicing them.
I agree.
Right?
And I'm really saying two things. One is Parler and places like that will survive. They will go somewhere else. Somebody will create a base. It's like when, the big names in the news, the Glenn Becks of the world, or, the Bill O'Reillys get canceled. They find a platform somewhere else because there's enough of a base.
Smaller.
Whatever. I mean, I'm not saying, that's smaller is going to be detrimental to them, but
right.
They come back because they have an audience. I guess that's the point. And as a capitalist, I always say, yeah. And as a capitalist, I always say that we are all a customer of somebody else. We're all buying and selling and trading and everything in between, and we're all exchanging our dollars that we for some goods or services that we have some value for. And so that's how it should work. And I totally support the right of the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Twitters to cancel these people. And just, I think you framed it nicely, which is, as a business, like we are used to seeing in restaurants, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. And I totally support that.
Well, and even on the right hand, even on the right of these issues, the precedent for this was already set when the Supreme Court ruled that some bakery in some southern shithole could refuse to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. All right. So the Supreme Court has held up this whole proposition. You don't like something about the customer, as long as you don't call them the N-word and put a sign up says no blacks, no service.
Well, and I think the other protection awarded to them is it's a private business. It's not a government-owned entity or a government purchaser. It's a private business, and they can do what they want, which, by the way, I think that this will ultimately protect and shield Trump himself. I could be wrong, but I think this will ultimately protect him from the words he used that day on Insurrection Wednesday. Because I just... Again, I could be wrong, and it doesn't mean that they can't use that as ammunition to go ahead with impeachment, but... him sitting up there, shouting and calling to action his base, is he allowed to say those things?
There's a difference between having the First Amendment right to say something and protection from liability for what you're saying. Those are two different things. And I don't think that the Senate trial on the impeachment, on the single article of impeachment, which is an incitement to insurrection from against Trump, and it's not going to be just for what he said. And do understand, this won't be about just what he said that day. This will be about the culmination of the effect of all of the lying and all the nonsense about the fraudulent election. So that's all going to come into it. This is not a criminal trial. It won't have those kind of.
And I wish it was too. Right? And that's what I've been saying a lot.
Don't worry. You want to see Trump involved in a criminal trial. Your chance is coming. So.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, I really do. I'm really conflicted about all of this because what is, I think, protected, what are protected rights, what I think are my capitalistic views, don't always align with what's morally correct. And despite what people may think, I do have, albeit small, I do have a moral compass.
Travis, I've always known that, and that always tempers how hard I come at you on some of these things. Now, last week, I know that everybody was able to tell that I was kind of losing my shit a little bit at the high crescendo of that conversation, but it wasn't personal. It was more, my culmination of being frustrated with just, the whack way people look at things sometimes. But having said all that, capitalism needs to be tempered with your moral center, right? With your moral compass. And so capitalism doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? And I think we'll talk about this in the future. I'm not overly prepared, but I have thought a lot about how a lot of your views are driven by your support for capitalism. And I've been a capitalist my whole, working life. So, and I support it too. And so I've been torn, but listen, as is the thing with, I think all this comes down to something, Travis, as America, California, or the United States, right? The way this society works is we have laws, and then we have forbearance that I've mentioned before, and we temper how we go about things based on our moral compass. And I think that's what we need to keep sight of. I don't think we've lost it as a country. I think that these are the type of issues that test that situation, but it is our society, our democracy, our form of government there are laws and they're the guidelines for things, but then do we prosecute certain things? Do we not? Right? Not every crime.
And the great equalizer, if I can interject here, the great equalizer is the government and what role the government plays in all that. And I've said, I think, something similar to this before. I think that there's a difference between what people should do and what people should be required to do. And that speaks to kind of this moral compass and what
I agree.
And how do you, again, if the equalizer or the judge and the jury and the executioner in that example happens to be the federal government, what role do they play, and how do you really, make that equitable and amicable for everybody? And so don't get me wrong. Let me just say this. When you take the current situation that we're talking about, Insurrection Wednesday, all that is Trump, everything that's going on, I try to really make sure that I stand on my beliefs where I think other examples, other tangents, and I often use the phrase devil's advocate, that if you take this example and you extrapolate it out and apply it to other circumstances, it wouldn't be a double standard. In other words, let's not, like you said, throw the baby out with the bathwater. But don't get me wrong. In this case, I wish I could be the sole judge, jury, and executioner and get rid of Trump and make these decisions. I wish we could have a double standard and say, fuck this guy, let's impeach him, let's make sure he never serves again. But for everything else, your rights are still protected, because we got to be careful.
I, too, would like to have this disintegration ray and be bedded in the front of my car, and then I could just disintegrate every asshole that cuts me off and gets in front of me. So I understand the compulsion, but we both understand that it doesn't work that way.
I know, and that's why people are fighting, because some people are staunch defenders of Trump and everything that's going on, and they're applying it just to these circumstances, and other people are saying, well, wait a minute, if you do this here, then you've also fucked things over here, and we got to be careful with that.
We do. So I think we agree on all of that. I mean, I think that we've touched, I don't know if we've clarified it, but let's try to remember this little conversation, because I think that we are saying something that we've been struggling to say for a long time. And that is that, just because you can do something doesn't always mean you should do something.
Right.
So
I agree with that.
Right. So your powers and that's how this government works correctly. Right. When we embrace that philosophy, both on the part of government. So, Travis, we need to imbue the federal government with certain powers, and then we need to trust the government not to use those powers every single chance they get. So, we have depended on a trust in our executive branch president, right, over all these years, that the powers that reside within the presidency are not abused. And that has been Trump's single biggest, let me just finish this real quick. That is going to turn out to be the single biggest issue. Getting all the hyperbole out of it, all the name calling, everything that I love to engage in so much. And
you're short on name calling today.
I know. I'm trying to be, somewhat, fair. But here's the thing: it is the abuse of power that is the thing that bothers me the most. And no matter how much I disagreed with a Ronald Reagan or George Bush or even a Richard Nixon, it's not until any of them would abuse the power of the presidency that I would ever even consider the idea of an impeachment. So, when I look back on the Clinton impeachment,
that was a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, he had some kind of oral sex or something.
So he's getting a little ass in the White House.
Yeah,
who cares?
Because Hillary was giving him erectile dysfunction, right? So, is that an impeachable offense? I mean, so was that the right use of that? I don't know.
Of course not.
Right, and that's why it didn't matter to me. But when Trump was impeached last year, that was for an abuse of power. I don't want to relitigate that, but
thank you.
But he's been impeached now for another abuse of power, and this abuse of power has had much more serious consequences, starting with, but not probably ending with, the insurrection on Wednesday. So the damage that Trump has done to the system, first off, let me say I don't think it's irreversible, okay? But it is significant, and there needs to be consequences, the least of which would be impeachment and then conviction in the Senate. And let's all remember that the only thing the Senate can do is convict him of the article of impeachment. That's it. They can't send him to jail. They can't do anything like that, right?
Yeah, which to
there
me,
are a
I
couple
think
consequences, right? Mm-hmm. There are a couple. If he's in office, they can remove him from office.
Right.
If he's out of office, they impeach him and convict him in the Senate, then they can take a simple majority vote to forbid him from ever holding office again. All of which should happen. Those are the.
Did we establish that? Can you impeach a president who's out of office?
I think you'll find that they can. There are, and God, this word is so hard for me to say. There are precedents for that. Right?
It's your Chicago accent.
Yeah, I don't have all. I don't have all the details on this because you're the junior lawyer. But here's the thing: there was a Secretary of War that it became apparent that he had been selling favors after the Civil War, and when he became convinced that he was going to be impeached and convicted for those offenses, he resigned. Okay, and then thinking that would provide him protection, that if he was out of office, he could not be impeached. He was impeached. He was impeached, but he wasn't actually convicted. But the point is, yeah, you can be impeached and you can be tried by the Senate after you're out of office. So,
and to me, that seems like an incredible waste of time. But that's a whole other point. Let me add something. I don't disagree.
Well, I mean, let me to that, because we talked about this a lot last week. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How important is it to you that Trump never be allowed to run again? I mean, on a scale of 1 to 0, is it 1 being I don't give a shit, or 0 I don't give a shit, and 10 being he absolutely should be forbidden from ever running for any kind of office again?
And I'm going to go back to what I said a second ago. And if I'm being totally honest, I'm really torn on that, because I think I would like to make a ruling on just this scenario and just Trump. I don't think he should run again. I don't think he should be allowed to. I think I'm gonna come on your side of the camp here and say I think Trump is dangerous. Okay,
he's dangerous.
But if we allow this to happen, if we do this for the sole purpose of preventing him from running again through this impeachment process and this conviction of the Senate, I fear that will be used as a tool in the future by political parties just because they don't like the other candidate. I mean, come on. We talk about the fact that there's no compromise between the Republicans and the Democrats. There's these, everything from the Supreme Court, the nuclear option, where the side that's in control, the side that has the majority, it got ugly. And they're just going to use their majority to get their agenda done. And so you could just see in some time in the future where if you set a precedent where
good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Where you're going to have a guy like this removed and then convicted so that he can't serve again. What if that's used for ill intentions? What if that's used in a scenario where it's not as cut and dry as Trump? So I'm going to repeat myself succinctly. I agree with you in this case of Trump. However, it's a dangerous precedent to set. So I wish I could wave my magic wand and just make a ruling on this example, but we got to be careful. What I would rather see is some type of criminal conviction. And again, let's not forget that the second round of impeachment discussion happened within weeks of him being out of the office, right? So if people go back and listen to this podcast at some time, years to come from now, we had free and fair elections in November. Trump refused to accept the results of the election, and sometime just weeks before the inauguration of the new president, this all went down. So my point is, the clock was ticking. He was already going to be gone, and any move to impeach or convict really would happen in like a 10-day period, something like that. So the point is he is going to be gone, and this is being rushed because it is Trump. He, in this example, is dangerous, and we do want to safeguard a guy like that from ever running again. Man, I don't know if that's I'm really nervous about that. and I don't have all the answers. I like to pretend that I do most of the time on the podcast, but
do I.
I'm really nervous about that, and I just think we should be cognizant about what we're doing. I think I would much rather have a scenario where, as of tomorrow, by the time this podcast comes out, we will have a new president. I'd rather have some type of criminal suit brought against him if that's in fact what we're saying he deserves. And I guess to put a period on that sentence, I would say that it's much more difficult for him to run for president if he's in jail versus some tail that's put on his exit of the White House through an impeachment. So that's, I think, what I would rather see. So, I don't know. It's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, could he be convicted with a criminal trial of insurrection? That, being convicted of insurrection would also prohibit you from running for president, running for any office again.
Right, any federal office, right?
Right, and that's conviction of insurrection. Sedition is another thing that he could be possibly criminally convicted of. So, sedition, my favorite word for a long time, has made a big comeback here.
Let me add something else here. Really, can I just add one more thing? And that is that by allowing this to be done through the House and through the Senate, then you're really taking away the power of the people's vote in their role in sending, casting their votes and sending the Electoral College to cast their vote for the president. So again, that's why I think you have to be careful because, and I get it, these are elected representatives of the people, but what you're really saying is that the Congress will be the ones to decide whether or not Trump in this case, but who knows in the future, can ever run again, and not the will of the people. So that's where it loses me a little bit, where I think we just have to be very careful.
Those are all good points. I think I don't have much to disagree with you about that. I have the same fears. I just think that we, as a people, we need to pick up the pace on what we do to protect the government and our way of governing. And I think that just like when I'd like to go back for just a second, Travis, if I can, because I do think that this all ties back into the situation with why is it important that Trump and most of and anybody associated with either white supremacy or domestic terrorism are being denied access to social media platforms and web hosting to some degree in an effort to, I think there's two different things here. I think that the platforms and the web hosting things are exercising their right to protect themselves and not be forced illegally to have to provide services to anybody that they think are despicable for whatever reason. Now, that's why they're doing it. Here's why it's good for society.
Maybe also lawsuit protection. Let's add that in there.
That's right. I don't think that. So I'm going to just back this up one more time. I don't think that the big tech companies that have exercised this ability to cut services for this sector of the political spectrum, it's not altruistic. They're not doing it for the good of the country. They might. Don't be surprised when you hear them in a Senate hearing under the Biden administration saying that's why they did it, but that's not why they did it. It's all self-serving, and they're not required to be anything else. When we'd be foolish to expect them to be much of anything else. And from a capitalist viewpoint, that's all they're required to be is looking out for their company and their investors and so forth. But why is it? But here's a separate question: why is it good for the country? Because when white supremacists have access to large bully pulpits where they can spread their message of white supremacy, anti-democracy, and so forth, and this goes for both domestic terrorists and white supremacy groups, it's good for society when they're denied access to these big bully pulpits. Right? Nobody says they can't stand on the street corner and say whatever the hell they want to say. They can start their own media companies if that's what they want to do. But to allow them willingly to exist on these huge platforms that reach millions and millions of people in our country.
It was very Trump of you. Millions and millions.
Millions. It's a big, beautiful conspiracy. Okay, that's just not good for the country.
I agree with you.
Right?
Listen, you get no argument from me on this point, and you're 100% right, my friend. That
right.
it is.
Thanks for listening, everybody. It's been good talking with you on pre-inauguration day. Go ahead.
You should have. There should be nobody who would ever argue that denying white supremacist groups access to a large platform like that is a bad thing or somehow bad for society. You get no argument from me on that point because this is cut and dry. Right? You talk about the moral compass. There should be no questioning that that is a problem or that these actions should be taken. However, in this, again, goes back to my concern where you apply a precedent like that to this scenario that is clearly cut and dry. You should have no questions about it. Where do you draw the line? What happens when you integrate things like AI, which I think is already happening in these advertising firms, with Facebook and Twitter, and what information you get to see? They concentrate and they direct advertising through AI to certain groups of people. So what happens when you add all these layers in the name of security and you start filtering information? And I go back to what we always said about Trump, which I think was the Facebook stance all along was, hey, we not only do we believe in free speech, we believe in then allowing the public to hear what this guy's saying because he is your elected leader. And if he is crazy and dangerous, you should hear that for no other reason than to be informed. And if he's going to hang himself by saying something that is dangerous or illegal, we can take action there too. We've evolved a long way from there. But so I'm just saying that, you're right. I'll repeat myself. You're right about this scenario.
Once again, thank you everybody for listening.
But we got to be careful. We just have to be careful because where do you draw the line when something is maybe just, the moral compass? And we have examples of this all throughout the country on the big issues. You and I talked last week about, or a couple of weeks ago, about the notion of this 50% and half the country is divided. And not to rehash that, but when you look at the issues, it's just a matter of, people don't agree about certain things like gun control, like abortion, and you name it, the list goes on, universal health care. So if we certainly don't want to get into a situation where we're applying moral compasses on those areas and filtering people out. And that's just what I worry about. And, the other question really is for a platform like a Facebook, a Twitter, or Parler, is it their job to be the one to silence these people, or is it the job of the FBI and the other agencies to go after criminals and crimes that were committed? And I guess,
well, I think, go ahead. I'm sorry, you're getting to your point. Go ahead.
Just this last point, and maybe this is a bad analogy, but something that's coming to mind to me is one thing that I can't fucking stand is, as a business owner, sometimes we have to get involved in our employees' personal lives in the matter of, say, child support. When an employee doesn't pay their child support, which means that they've had a separation in their marriage, they've had a dispute with the family finances, they've been ruled to pay money, whether it's the husband or the wife, to the other spouse, and they don't pay it. And therefore, when we hire them on and we start collecting their taxes and paying their taxes on their behalf, now it gets traced back to us as their employer, and then we are forced to get involved in their personal lives and withhold their child support payments and send those payments on to the agency on their behalf. And I personally can't fucking stand that. I don't want to know your business. I don't want to know that you didn't pay your bills. I don't want to know that you are maybe right and you dispute the fact that you owe it, but it shouldn't be my business to do that for you. I'm only having to do it because you couldn't fucking do it. And now the child support agencies are coming to me to do their job. They should have to go collect it from the person that owes it and not make me do it. And so I guess in that example, I'm kind of like a neutral party and I'm being brought into a situation that I shouldn't be brought into. And that's not the same gravity as this. And I don't mean it to be, and maybe it's a poor analogy, but I just use it to highlight the fact that, where does the liability, where does the responsibility ultimately lie for something like this?
Well, not to get sidetracked, because I'd love to do a deep dive on that, because I've had employees and I've been contacted, and my personal policy, I think I can say this now without fear of retribution, is if you were my employee and I was contacted by EDD and had to garnish your wages, you were fired. You were gone. So I had an answer for that. Wasn't really much of a problem for me.
Let me just say, fast forward 20 years later, you'd have no employees.
Well, I mean, I've tried to make it known to my employees at the point of hire that if I ever have to garnish your wages, that's going to be the end of our relationship, because I'm not going to do that. I never did it. I never paid a garnished wage. I had a few people that got involved with it, and they soon found themselves unemployed. Right.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, because fuck that. I'm not doing that.
It's annoying as shit, right?
Right. And here's the thing. I think that's how that's supposed to work. I mean, I think the message to deadbeat dads, right, which is another reason why I like to take a deep dive on this, because I fucking hate them, is that, hey, you pay your child support or you're going to be an undesirable employee. That really the point is not to make you collect it, Travis. That's not really the point of that. So I'm not saying whether it's a good plan or a bad plan, but it is how government sometimes works these things. The plan was never for you to collect the child support. The plan was to inspire potential deadbeat dads to pay their fucking child support.
Exactly. But here's the crazy thing with that. Here's the net result, is that it kind of has the same net effect as your example on the social media platforms, in that once these guys are removed, it's good for society. And if I don't if I don't fire these people and I collect and pay their child support on their behalf, it's good for society. It's good for the recipient, because they're getting their money. Yeah. And if I fire them and they don't have a job, now the spouse and the children, they don't have the money. So you know what I mean? It's like, it's interesting that it has the same effect.
Once they become a criminal by violating these laws, one of the potential outcome consequences is that they lose their freedom and end up in jail, or
death penalty?
They lose their job and end up unemployed. And so, yeah, that's not
COVID?
Good. Death by COVID. That's right. Hey, you hear Phil Spector died? You know who Phil Spector is?
Yeah, I saw that. It was what was the headline that I read? Phil Spector, music producer, ... murderer, dead at 81.
Right, and his daughter is saying that it's because of complications from COVID. So you should really love that. Right.
Everybody's death is from COVID.
Right.
You know what's interesting too is a lot of just kind of the narrative in the change, the turnover in power with the inauguration tomorrow. Obviously, there's a lot of this, Capitol insurrection stuff still coming out, but there is other things to reflect upon. I saw a lot of stuff in this last week about the number of people sentenced to death on behalf of the federal government is the highest it's been. I want to say it was 17, maybe. That number could be wrong. I'm not sure if it was during Trump's tenure or in the last year of his presidency or whatever. And of course, that's the opportunity for all of the anti-death penalty people to come out and say that, this is a terrible thing and that's one more, negative thing about Trump. But where are you on the death penalty?
The death penalty?
Yeah, capital punishment.
I don't have a strong feeling on that. I mean, I guess really, I'm probably for it, right? If it's applied correctly. Some of the issues I have less to do with am I for or against the death penalty than with, is it, once again, is it being used as part of the systemic racism that runs rampant through the criminal justice system? When you look at the statistics and see who really gets the death penalty and gets put to death, I think you'll find that it's by far and away, a higher number of people of color. So once again,
I think you could reverse that back, right? You just trace it up the line to the people that are incarcerated, right? So yeah, I mean, there's probably we should get a resident expert to come on the podcast and talk to us about that. But
wow, who's that?
I don't know. We got to find one. It's not you and it's not me.
Yeah, you're a little out of my bailiwick there.
But I just thought it was interesting that I hadn't heard that in a while. Although I was aware, I think from the federal level, that we maybe hadn't executed people in a while. Maybe it was a woman too. I think there was a
woman that was executed this last week.
Wasn't she a white woman too?
Yep, she was.
I think she was.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about that case. I don't know who that was, but you'd like to think that we got it right. You'd like to think, and of course, we could spend hours upon hours talking about how maybe we don't. But I would like to think once we've exhausted all efforts, you've been convicted, you've been proven of a heinous crime beyond all shadow of a doubt. And I think in this day and age with DNA and everything else, that fuck, if you did it, you did it. You should fucking fry. That's what I think.
I'm okay. I don't think we can gin up much of a debate on this, because I kind of feel the same way. I mean, when you look at, so when you have somebody that really does commit some kind of heinous crime, what else can you really do? I mean, and there's a whole bunch of things that factor into that. Like, should society really be spending the money that they're spending on keeping a convicted murderer that's been sentenced to the death people by the judicial system on death row? If they're sitting there for 30 years, it's not working, right?
I agree.
So, but then, here's the other side. Here's the flip coin. Let me be the devil's advocate for 1 second on this.
Put your sombrero back on.
Yeah. When you hear the stories about people that are cleared, after spending 20 years on death row or 40 years in prison for something that they could have been sentenced to death for, but maybe weren't because they were in a state with a moratorium on it or something like that. And they're cleared by DNA, and then it comes out so many times that, and again, once again, race plays a big part in this, right? Because time after time, when you hear these stories, these are Southern DAs that go after people of color and make their career on these kind of prosecutions that are very often just based on bullshit.
Well, what I think is part of that is I watch a lot of these crime shows.
Yeah.
I'm into that shit. And I'm trying to earn my, junior badge to go along with my junior attorney degree.
Isn't there a show, wrongful convictions and plane crashes? Isn't that a thing on YouTube?
Well, if you look at my YouTube history, it's all plane crashes pretty much. But
don't worry, I'm not looking at it. The FBI is.
I know they are. But I think part of it, too, is that they're ultimately looking for a suspect to convict versus solving the crime.
Exactly.
And rather than, it's like, okay, yeah, this guy, probably did it, or he was in the area, or he's a guy that we can use as a scapegoat that doesn't have family and nobody will be missing him. And if we execute him, whatever, we need the token black guy to put in jail, rather than solving the crime of what actually happened. I bet you that's probably more of what we're seeing. I'll let you know as I graduate through the academy. But
yeah, there you go. I guess to answer this question truthfully, if there was a way to be 100% sure that everybody that gets sentenced to death is guilty, and there's never, none of those people are ever going to be cleared by DNA or some other thing in the future, then I would be perfectly fine with it. Hey, you killed, this whole family and these little kids. Fuck you.
I agree.
But what if it turns out to not be the guy, and it's the twin brother or the distant relative or the fucking milkman that's a psycho and just happens to target this family? And I guess one of my long term, and this is probably from watching too much TV when I was a kid, is that you get wrongfully accused of something, get convicted. I can't think of, really, that's where I'd like to have the poison pill embedded in my tooth. If that ever happened, I'd just like, okay, let's just end this now, right?
Can we?
Couldn't deal with that.
Should we allow torture? So we can torture these people just mildly, nothing that'll kill them, but just mild torture to get the truth out of them. Pluck off a couple fingernails or waterboarding.
Oh my God. Welcome to the Philippines.
But if we can get the truth, sometimes that might be better than DNA. No?
Let me ask you a question. When you're ready to move out of California because you're fed up, are you going to move to the Philippines or Thailand or
I might.
Bangladesh or someplace where they do this kind of shit?
They have good street food.
So did you hear, because this isn't, even though everybody might think it is, this isn't all insurrection podcast all the time.
No, it's not.
Did you hear that Putin's sole significant opposition, political rival, Navalny or something like that, he was poisoned by the what is it, the GRU, the
new
current,
KGB.
The current form of the KGB. They smeared some kind of Russian. I can't even say this with a straight face. They smeared some kind of Russian poison on his underwear. Poisoned him. And then he went to Germany. He was transported to Germany for treatment and has recovered there and could have stayed there. And I think this probably disqualifies this guy to be president of anything because he voluntarily went back to Russia. So I guess that makes him some kind of patriot or something. But you know damn well you're never, once you go back to Putin, you're never getting out of jail.
What is this? I kind of vaguely am familiar with this story, but what's the poison they put on his underwear?
I don't know. But here's how they know it was
Russian.
Russian.
A dick rash or something, and then he.
Well, there's a couple of there are some substances which our intelligence services know that only Russian intelligence services possess. Right? Nobody else has them. So when someone is poisoned by them, it's pretty obvious who did it. Now, here's the thing to consider, right? So what's the significance of this and why do I even bring it up? Because although this is not insurrection connected, it's another thing we need to think about going forward, okay, that I think is pertinent to this podcast. We've had 4 years of, I found a new term that I like even better than my current. So I don't think you're going to like it as much, but I'm going to roll it out here, debut it on the show today. We've had 4 years of bootlicking by Trump to Putin. Okay.
Only
so
4?
Everybody. Well, I mean, only 4 that matter, right? The 4 he was the president. So Putin has been vastly emboldened over this 4 years. And that is evidenced by the fact that he has chosen to imprison his sole political rival the moment he hit Russian soil. And he didn't make it out of the airport before he was arrested. So they poison
this dude's underwear. He gets a dick rash. Yeah. He flees, and then he comes back for whatever reason because he's a moron, and then they capture him.
Right. When they were flying him into Moscow, the airport in Moscow, but there were several hundreds or thousands of his supporters at the airport.
Why didn't they just shoot the plane down? Their old MO.
Yeah. Or shoot down the supporters. I mean, let's just kill a few things. So they, because it was their plane. For one thing.
Well, they get the insurance money.
It's not like American
Airlines. The oligarchs
Airlines
will back it up.
Yeah, it's not like American Airlines was flying this fucker into Russia, right? So they divert the plane to another more militarily controlled airport with no supporters there. He's arrested there. He's taken into custody, and who knows what will happen. But what's the significance of Putin choosing to do that this week, right? So
why did the guy come back to Russia?
Because he is the sole significant political opposition to Putin as president for life. Theoretically,
which they just recently changed, right? I think in this last year they did something to where he could now be president for life again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's, the way things change in this kind of a setup is you have to have massive public support, right? I mean, it's the way things change everywhere, government-wise, but it has to be pretty massive public support in Russia to overcome what forces Putin has at his discretion to use to suppress that opposition, right? So this guy, whether he ever becomes president or not, he foments the opposition, right?
Why, if Putin has the job secured that he can be the president for life, do they need to poison this dude's underwear?
Well, that's the question we're raising, right? Why go to that extreme? Why would he do that? Because in any previous period of time with any other president of the United States, he would have suffered quite a bit of backlash from the United States, where when we had a position of moral, superiority over the Soviet Union on the world stage, right? So Trump has successfully destroyed that on a worldwide basis, thus emboldening Putin to do something so overtly dictator-like, right?
Is this your speculation, or is the Biden camp coming down with a position on this?
I haven't heard anything officially from the Biden camp. I mean, these are some views that I did hear, on probably MSNBC, to be honest with you, full disclosure. But I think it was said correctly, right? I mean, I've been following this Putin business for a long time, so what are we going to do now? I mean, here we are in a position. So is this...
Why do we have to do something about it? And, let me ask that in the sense of, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Ethiopia, very similar circumstances there. And those two countries aren't unique in that sense. This type of shit happens all over the world, and America's role in being the police. So why now? Why Putin?
Well, because
Pooty pants.
Yeah. So, well, first off, Ethiopia is not any threat to the United States, no matter what happens in Ethiopia. But Russia is a threat, and we're currently under cyber attack from Russia. I mean, we might as well be at war with them. The only thing we're missing are the actual gunshots, and this is a direct result of the way our soon-to-be former president has been bootlicking Putin the whole 4 years. We still don't know. I mean, my guess is it's the money. My guess is this is all tied back to Deutsche Bank and the millions and millions.
That's of German,
dollars
though, isn't it?
Owes people. It is, but heavily influenced by it was Russian money laundering that Deutsche Bank was involved in.
That's an interesting kind of angle to look at things. And you said we're basically at war with Russia, but aren't we really at war at all at any given point with every country? Because there's really only three power players here. There's us, there's Russia, and there's China. So we've all got our alliances and our allegiances and connections to every other country in the world through those main powerhouses.
Yeah, except the difference between China and Russia is, and I'm not going to, one's not better for us than the other. I think it's a matter of which one's more dangerous at this moment to us, right? No doubt, I agree with you. China is the other big threat. But everything to do with China is a long game. We're looking at decades, if not, I mean, their game is long, right? I mean,
and we get cheap iPhones, and Russia doesn't give us anything.
iPhones, right? We have a decent. I mean, our best defense against China being aggressive toward American interests is our economic involvement with China, right? That's been the best, most successful political strategy that I can think of in the last 100 years from America. And I'll give Nixon credit for opening up those relations. Now, I think we'll have to credit Trump for fucking it up as much as possible. But I'm sure there's a lot of ill-informed, ignorant Trump supporters around the country that think China is the cause of all our problems in the world. And it's just not the case. They are dangerous. Their philosophies are in conflict with us up to a certain point, but they're not being dangerously aggressive toward American interests, and Russia is. And also, because Trump either they have something on Trump, or he's just too stupid to understand the military significance of NATO, or all of that combined. I really don't know. But
wasn't it Mitt Romney, by the way, who took a lot of shit? I guess that was when Trump ran the first time by saying that he thought Russia was the most significant threat to the U.S., and everyone kind of downplayed that. I think that was him.
I think that was too. I'm not a Mitt Romney person, I don't memorize his positions on things.
I don't either, but we would have been better off with him.
I do remember a time before Trump was in my political orbit of considerations that I thought Romney would be the worst thing for American politics. But it's funny how how it just takes a different perspective, right? So after 4 years of Trump, Romney seems, highly trustworthy.
Why would he have been bad?
Well, plus, here's the thing: Ronnie did a really good segment with Jay Leno on Leno's Garage.
So he made you laugh, and so you approve of him now.
Yeah, I find him to be a much better guy than I thought he was.
He actually turns out to be a real legitimate businessman. As compared to Trump, he helped start Staples and other successful businesses.
Let me reiterate here that as far as I'm concerned, and I don't plan on ever. Well, let me just say this. I don't think that being a good businessman is any kind of fucking qualification to be president. It's probably the least important thing. And if we haven't figured out as a country that being a good businessman no way makes you a good president, then we're just not paying attention. Okay?
I don't think it hurts, though. We talked a lot about what the qualifications are for a president, and we really didn't come up with any. But I don't think that would hurt to put that on the list. Just the fact that Trump said he was and he wasn't, I mean, it doesn't mean that that's not a bad thing.
I just don't think that the qualities it takes to run a successful business are the qualities it takes to be a successful president.
You know what I think is a good quality, and I don't know how you vet this, but I'm like halfway through Obama's book, which is excellent, by the way. He was always a very good orator. He's an even more excellent writer. He had a lot of things going for him. I mean,
it's good. I'm going to read it on your recommendation.
No, it's excellent. And, listen, I don't agree with a lot of his policies. The single biggest thing, I think, was the affordable health care and just the way it went down. And we've talked a lot about that. All politics are local, and we vote based on how things affect us. And that one in particular was very difficult for me and my family. But nonetheless, he had a lot of good things for him, too. And as I'm reading his book, and I haven't read his other books, but one of the things that stands out to me is his ability to assemble a team. Everything from his campaigns in the Senate to the run at the White House, and he is very vocal about crediting his team for his successes all along the way. And
he's an organizer.
He is.
He's an organizer.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's one of the most important qualities of a leader is the ability to assemble a team around you. In other words, I think a lot of narcissistic people and people in a position of authority are afraid to do that because they think it diminishes their importance. If they're not the one coming up with all the ideas and all the solutions, then they feel like they're less important and they feel challenged by that. And I think differently, and I think Obama sees things differently in the sense that it doesn't diminish your importance, it only magnifies it because this team around you can focus on the things that they do well, and then you can focus on the things that you do well because none of us are great at everything. So
right.
I think that when you look at maybe how he went through his 8 years, that was one of his biggest strengths.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Everything about that. I mean, I think that's something that, I've always known about his history as an organizer in Chicago and so forth. And I always thought that was going to be, when the talk was, oh, he's too inexperienced to be president. Okay. When that was the topic of discussion in 2006 or 7 or whatever it was, I always thought that his history of organizing was going to be one of his strongest suits. And I think that, I think that's going to, those are the kind of traits we need in a president. Why? It's just not real. I didn't think, what's the guy from New York, Bloomberg? Mm-hmm. I didn't think, I never supported Bloomberg or Tom Steyer or any other billionaire for 1 second at all. I never thought it was a good idea. I think Bloomberg is a fascinating character in his own right, but he just seems like he'd be the worst president. He would be everything Trump is, just on the other side, and have all the same kind of dictator-like aspirations that every big, giant, successful CEO has. Do you think I want Bill Gates to run the fucking government?
Yeah, but you know what though? Again, those are examples. Bezos? Those are names that we could probably go down the list and agree, and maybe other CEOs that are not that famous or in the news, but that doesn't mean that having business experience is a bad qualification. And again,
it can't be your only qualification.
No, yeah, I agree with that totally. Right. But when you look at Obama and when he came into office, and when I look at some of the struggles, like I said, with the healthcare, is that wasn't really the biggest issue. It was the economic collapse that really was happening in Bush's last term with the housing bubble and all the big banks and the subprime mortgages, and that was what he had to focus on after the election and before he was inaugurated, and he was, trying to get a second round of the TARP Act money passed within like 30 days. So that was the priority. And so you had to understand all of the moving parts that have to do with finance and housing and all of those things, which he admittedly didn't, but then was able to recognize.
No one man could.
Right, exactly. And he was able to recognize that and assemble a team that did.
Yeah, let's just think back to, the comparisons are going to be stark for a very long time, right?
All right. Well, hey,
I don't disagree. Are we back up or no?
Yeah. So we're good. So what were we talking about?
About how you're becoming an Obama fan.
You know what I think about Obama, and this goes back to what we were talking about, I think, a little while ago, is when you look at how Trump has approached the presidency, and when you compare even, say to Bush, what I think the major difference is the lack of respect of the office of the president. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that I am missing. And, I think you just have to have respect for the office. You got to play by the rules. You don't have to like it. If Trump honestly thinks that this election was stolen from him, there's other means to fight that, not the way he's going about it. And that shows a lack of respect for the office. And that's a problem.
And I think I would expand on that by saying that I think one of the biggest problems for me during this whole time has been, I think Trump thought he had some kind of mandate from the people to destroy the institutions of government. And especially when they seem, overburdened by bureaucracy or something of that nature. But again, it's the institutions of government that make it work. You can't destroy the institutions in a democratic government and expect it to function on its own, unless you think that you are the sole component. You are the sole institution that is required in order for it to function. And that is certainly what he has thought the whole time.
I wonder about that.
He said as much, right?
Well, this goes back to the very beginning, that I think he's just making this whole thing up as he goes along. I don't think he really ever had a plan. I just think he thought he's been successful in his life. He only thinks, that everything he's doing is correct. And I think there are people that we probably both know that when you have some modicum of success that you think, well, shit, I guess I'll just keep doing things the way I'm doing because it's working. I was talking to a dude on the phone the other day, among other things, about somebody we both know who is just a major megalomaniac. And this guy I was talking to told me that he actually...
Be careful now.
He told me that he met Trump one time, many years ago, like in the late 90s and 98, in New York at a restaurant. He was like a friend of the restaurant owner, and Trump was in there. And he said he had a brief encounter, but he did speak with him for a few minutes. And what immediately struck him was his lack of intelligence. Mm-hmm. He just seemed to be totally unaware of the things he would try to crack a joke, for example, and there was really no punchline. It wasn't necessarily funny, but he was surrounded by yes men, and everybody around him would laugh. And then Trump seemed confused as to why they were laughing, because he didn't necessarily mean it as a joke, but his people thought it was a joke. Basically, he said he was a big retard.
There it is, and retard makes a second appearance. Couch funeral. Yeah, well, that fits with my mental picture of Trump. I mean, nothing about anything he's done makes me think of intelligence. I mean, I just think he's a fucking boob, right? There's some reporting you could look back on if you were give a shit, but I don't even know if it's necessary. But I have become convinced that the theory that he never intended to be president is the actual correct theory.
Which was my theory.
Was it your theory?
Yes.
And so there's a reporter, Olivia Nunzi, and she is
Olivia
pretty well
Nunzi
known.
John?
Yeah, no. You check it out on your Twitter feed. She's all over Twitter. If you follow her, you'll see her stuff. But she has had the most informed sources regarding, the Trump administration, the inside, the gossip part of it. She's not a hardcore political reporter or anything like that. But she's and she when you hear her discuss this, she's like, hell no, he didn't think he was going to be president. He never wanted to be president. He thought this was going to be some kind of brand building thing, and then he'd be done with it.
Yeah, more Trump, water and Trump ice,
right.
Trump watches.
So, to kind of wind this conversation back around a little bit to something we started out with. I've been a big fan of impeachment for Donald Trump, and I've been a big fan of him being convicted for these articles of impeachment. And do I think they're going to convict him this time? If that's a question you're asking me, okay, let me answer that for you, Travis.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
do you think they're going to convict him this time?
I don't think so. It's certainly a possibility. There's a lot more possibility that he's convicted this time than there was last time, because there was a zero impossibility in the first
0.0.
Yeah, 0.0, because of Mitch McConnell. So this time, Mitch McConnell is pretty fed up with Trump, right? And so I will say that if Mitch McConnell decides if he makes it known that he's going to vote to impeach, then you're going to see a lot more. You're going to see a lot of, I think we can think of 5 or 6 pretty sure votes for impeachment in the Senate, in the new Senate, on the Republican side, but it'll take 17. So if Mitch McConnell becomes one, he'll drag another 10 or 15. He'll drag 20 votes with him, right?
We haven't had any friendly wagers in a while. If Trump is convicted, will he move to Russia?
I'll take the not move to Russia side of that bet. He's moving to Mar-a-Lago, where he'll spend the rest of his hopefully short, stupid life in obscurity. But here's where I was going with this. Rather they convict him or not, which would be my preference. I think it's important here. I think it'll be easier to move on and heal the wounds and have unity and all that shit after the people responsible for this sedition and insurrection face consequences. So, but I've also kind of moved toward the opinion that it does appear that Trump is facing consequences for causing this domestic terrorist situation to get out of control. And I do think that people are holding him responsible.
And you feel better about that because you felt before that he was going to get
getting away with it. Yeah. He's, it's not like the left media, the left-wing media or the mainstream media or whatever you want to call it hasn't been calling him out on it. They have the whole time. And, that is what's used by people on the right. Media is the enemy of the people and all that's bullshit, and I don't agree with any of it. So let's save that for another podcast, because I know you look at that differently. But how could they not? How could they not? Because every goddamn day was 3 outrageously ridiculous things that Trump would do or say that in any other presidency probably would have brought that president down. So really, the media, any real press, they had no choice but to constantly report the nonsense that was going on. So it's disingenuous and straight up wrong for anybody on the right to say, hey, the press didn't cover Trump fairly. I don't agree with that, and I'm never going to agree with that. So having said that, I do believe that people are coming to understand that he has fomented this break among people. He's not the sole cause of it, but he has done everything within his power to make it worse, to make it as bad as it can be. And He is directly responsible for what we're seeing, what we saw in the Capitol. And I do believe that he is being punished by society. And so back to our big tech, people, the platforms and the web hosting companies and all of the corporate sponsors, there's 50 large corporations that are vowing to never send money to the Republican Party again, as long as Trump is some kind of part of it.
Which I think is a mistake.
Well, I mean, that's a good discussion, but here's my point. I think whether he gets convicted or not, I think his chances to ever run for political office, which is my main reason for wanting him convicted, is probably nil. Okay.
Should he be sentenced to a Russian chemical underwear smear?
Well, I can guarantee you, and this is the kind of the ironic part that you bring that up. If he existed in Russia, he'd already be dead. That's the part I don't think he gets, right? I mean, he thinks all this bootlicking with Putin is somehow going to benefit him because, Travis, and all our listeners out there and any Trump supporters that remain connected to this podcast, he doesn't give a fuck about you. Okay. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about this country. He only cares about his self-interest. And so, yeah, I don't.
Do you think that the people that support him do so because they think he cares about them? I don't know that that's necessarily true. You think so?
Yeah. Look, so, again, I think for me, it's in the long term, I'm going to be interested in thinking and reading and seeing things that take this cult of personality and dissect it and break it down into the groups and what they mean. So for me, right now, here's how I see it. At the top of this terrorism in right-wing, white supremacy pyramid are the people we saw bust into the, those are the worst of the worst, right? These are the guys that have the Camp Auschwitz T-shirts and the 6 million Jews.
I was
wasn't
confused
enough.
by that too. There was a guy who was in the headlines. Maybe he had the Nazi sweater on or something.
Yeah.
But did he break in?
Yeah, he's inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's inside.
Or there was a guy with antlers or something.
Yeah, well, that guy is some kind of actor schmuck, and he's been arrested. And that's the guy that.
But is it only they didn't arrest people who were just outside, right? Are the only people that broke in?
Yeah, only the people that broke in.
Okay.
So they have. Here's the latest statistics I heard. They have like 120 people under arrest or something like that. They have 10,000 tips or something coming in. They have hundreds and hundreds of hours of video from inside.
Yeah, because people were posting it, which is why I said you should.
And there were journalists. There were journalists that followed the crowd in in order to report what was going on. There were journalists that followed in with the crowd with their cameras, right? And so this is what we're seeing. So, you had a whole bunch of it that got posted to social media right off the bat that we saw lots of. But then there are more better videos and more intense videos. So have you seen the one with the guy with the antlers and a bunch of them up in the Senate chamber, praying, and then the other guys that are leaning over a desk in the Senate, pictures of documents, and the one guy says, "Okay, well, it's time to set up a new government." Yeah, I think that who did they refer to? They referred to, was it Trump? I think it was Trump. They said, "Yeah, I think he'd be good with this. We're good. Let's do it. Let's do this." They're idiots. They're idiots.
Yeah, of course,
right?
They're idiots.
Yeah. So you've got that group, and then I think you've got all the other people that went over there. So whatever the number was, my wife thinks it's tens of thousands, not 250, not hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, probably tens of thousands that were at the rally and maybe surrounding the Capitol.
Right. And then several thousand to somewhere between several hundred to several thousand people broke in and committed federal crimes inside the Capitol building. Every single person, maybe press excluded, that walked through those doors is probably subject to federal arrest. And it looks like a whole hell of a lot of them are going to be arrested, and they already have been. Did want to mention that the guy with the antlers, his first complaint in prison was that they wouldn't serve him organic food. Oh, go fuck yourself, please. So, good, starve. We really don't give a shit, right? I think lube would be probably your more immediate concern. So, all of that having been said, but I think you break down these groups into more manageable groups that really deserve a little closer look, so we can try to understand, right?
I think so. And this, let me extrapolate a little bit, and why I think I'm not a fan of political parties. And I think I've talked about this. I'm the one who's in favor of at least a third party and trying to figure out a way to make that work. But I think it's, using your word, dangerous when we lump people into either party. And I think that happens in the media. It happens at the dinner table when you simply say it's either this side or that side. And I believe that type of narrative forces people to pick a side and decide that, hey, if you're not in this camp, you're in that camp. And that's not right, because
go back when Newt Gingrich rose to power in was it the Senate? Was he the speaker? He was the speaker of the House,
yeah, he was
right?
the Speaker of the House.
So when he came in and all that Tea Party stuff and all this, they would like to tell this a different way, and they would like to blame Democrats for all the identity politics and all the name calling and all this stuff. But it really didn't start until Newt Gingrich and his ilk, and they brought a different level of non-civility to the political realm. And I don't care if anybody accepts that on face value or not.
But even if we accept it on face value, that's happening within the government, right? That happened by Newt, for Newt, and for the party. But I'm talking about the rest of us, the rest of the people in the world, where you have to make a decision, right? You and I have talked a lot on this podcast about people that we know and casting their votes and who to vote for and the decisions that they make. All I'm saying is this: there's not just two choices. And by not voting Republican or not voting Democrat, you're not throwing your vote away. You're either making a decision that you believe there's a better candidate, or you're taking a stand against the fact that you don't want to be put in a box.
Well, you're talking. You look. I doubt if she's listening, but if she is, you're big. It's my sister that has a problem with you voting for yourself for Joe Jorgensen, right? As a good right wing conservative, not really a Trump fan, but definitely would vote for Trump in a heartbeat over the best Democrat, right? Because she's convinced that Democrats just have a plan to take the country into chaos and ridiculousness.
And that's true.
It's not based on anything except her personal stuff, right? So she's got her own issues, and she's very much the victim right now. She's pissed that she's being called a white supremacist. She's pissed that she's being called a domestic terrorist, that she's being lumped in with the thugs that went to the Capitol. I mean,
and I think that's kind of what I'm saying, because you brought up this point in the sense that now that we know, and you could make an argument in whatever the hell year that was, Trump version 1, that there was enough to turn a blind eye to, that even though he told us who he was, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And then 4 years later, we see how quickly things have turned and what he's turned into and really what he stands for. And he stands for, among other things, disrespect for the office of the presidency, disrespect for free and fair elections and the result thereof, and how to gracefully turn over the transition of power. That's a small list of things that we now know about him. And so, yes, I think you can make the point that if you're still defending Trump, that you, at the very least, are ignorant or are not paying attention. But I think the real difference is when you look at things from a big picture, it's not just about Trump. And it shouldn't just be about Democrats. It should be about, who are the best people that we can put forward to guide this country. and you brought it through the lens of what'd you call it, the vetting process or the gatekeeper. You know, who are the gatekeepers in selecting these candidates and allowing us to make this choice? And I guess I just think we need to take a step back and realize that we shouldn't be putting people in buckets, and we shouldn't say that there's only two choices, because there's not.
You know, I'm all for splitting of the Republican Party into as many crazy factions as you want to and calling them third parties, because that's just going to ensure that my point of view stays in power and longer. So, I mean, I think I said it before. My personal opinion, and I'm open to all of that, but I'm not a fan of what I see in other countries, right? I'm not a fan of multiple party governments and how that works in a democracy, because it typically leads to, I just think it leads to chaos. I mean, I think it was one of the things that, as we look at how democracies have risen and fallen around the world since the beginning of our experiment, it seems like for all the things that are wrong with it at this point, ours is still working the best of all of them. And I think it will again. So for me, I'm in favor of a strong Republican Party that takes, I think if they were smart, they would try to unify all of the factions that are so desperately not supporting, so desperately disagree with the Democratic government outlook of the Democrats, rather, So, and then we can have robust debates or discussions about the issues that we differ on. That's how this can be. It doesn't have to be like this. I guess my point about bringing Newt Gingrich up was that really the bitter partisan politics really started with him. And yeah, we've always been on other, but that's good. That's healthy to have opposite sides of issues. But the way that him and the Tea Party people brought in the litmus test and the non-tolerance, that's anti-democratic, and in the long run is unhealthy for the country. So I think we move back towards some combination of your views and mine. I think we try to cut out and not provide huge platforms to lunatics and fuckwads that want to tear everything down. I'm all for free speech, and I will fight to the death to defend the right of the Nazis to march, make a parade or something if they do everything by the rules. But that's it. That's as far as I go. We don't owe them anything. We don't allow them on our social media platforms. We don't allow them to have large bully pulpits. And the reason we don't is because it's bad for the country.
Well, what are the rules, though?
The rules are we don't let Nazis and white supremacists, things that are obvious that we agree on as a society. And
but they can march and have rallies.
Well, I mean, they can do things that are guaranteed to all Americans by free speech, right? So, but you can't march through. You can't march along people over with your cars and then have the president try to make some moral equivalency between the stupid fucks at Charleston, all of them, on that, the ones marching with their tiki torches, all the rest of that shit. Those are the same assholes that were at the Capitol last week. And you don't let those guys, you don't let them cause violence and, cause conflict on purpose and then morally equivalence them with people that want very racist Confederate statues that were put up by a Jim Crow government in order to strike terror into the hearts of black people in this country and keep them in their place. You don't equivalence those two groups. The people that gathered in Charleston to protest these Confederate statues, they were right, period. and the stupid fuckers that marched on them with their tiki torches and stuff, they were wrong. And there's no moral equivalent. And all of the people that have been defending Trump this whole time since that, when he says, "Oh, there are very fine people on both sides," it was fucking ridiculous. And I understand.
But but you're saying you still support their right to do that?
If they want to have a peaceful demonstration, fine. But if they want to attack the people, come down with their, blood and sand and all their Nazi shit, then, there's consequences.
Like, I'm pretty sure in Germany, I don't think you can even wave a swastika flag.
No, you can't. I mean, their way of dealing with their history is to bury it in the sand. That's the same way that Trump and the right wants to deal with our history, right? They want to. Something came out yesterday. I don't have the full bore on this, but I'm going to recommend that you, after this podcast, you Google something called 1776 report that came out yesterday from the Trump administration or somebody. I don't know who it was.
All right, what's the gist of this?
Well, this is some kind of childlike attempt to answer the 1619 issues, which goes back to the first time slaves were brought to this
1619 project or something.
Yeah. So so on Martin Luther King Day. I mean, this is the epitome of the racist nonsense that we've been subjected to for the last 4 years. Not to mention the 8 years prior to that, right? Where all these fuckers were having a gut-wrenching revulsion to the Obama election to president. This is the racist nonsense. So on Martin Luther King Day, right? No matter what you think of that holiday, one way or the other, on that day, 2 days, a week after the insurrection and 2 days before the inauguration, this administration puts out this 1776 nonsense that is some kind of childlike attempt to rewrite history about, this is more of this nonsense about how happy the slaves were, all this stuff, right? So I haven't read it yet. I just heard about it yesterday, and I will get a hold of it. I just have to, sometime between podcasting and working, I'll have a chance to find it. Listen, I need to give myself a break. Within a week period, I read 2 1-hour transcripts full of Trump talking, and I lost 20 IQ points as a result.
Hey, you never get those back. It's worse than alcohol.
They're not coming back. I know, really. I could go back to drinking, right, and be better off than reading much more Trump drivel. And I got a feeling that 1776 is more sophomoric nonsense from that group of people, from white supremacists.
I wrote a note.
I'm gonna name a name here. My guess is that it's probably highly supported by Stephen Miller. So we'll find out all about him going forward.
The only stuff I saw was a lot of posts about MLK, and the only negative I saw was, which I didn't, I got to go back and see how much of this is true, but his desire for universal basic income. That was essentially something that he was campaigning for back in the 60s, among other things, so much so that I think he even called it that. So I got to go back and look at that.
Excuse me. Oh, I got this frog in my throat. Who was campaigning for universal income?
Martin Luther King.
Oh, Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at his time, during his time, he looked at the country and just said, "Hey, the country is sick." And that's a direct quote from him. And I think what he meant was that look, we know that the inequities of racism that Black Americans have suffered are uniquely different than all other minority groups in this country. And that's because of slavery. And he understood that it was going to take a large group of people in a long time to try to fix some of those things. And he killed for saying that. And so I think, for me, Martin Luther King Day is just a tough day. I mean, I just know that it's a holiday. I mean, I mean, I think currently we don't like Columbus Day anymore, but everybody likes,
We don't even call it that. We call it Indigenous Peoples Day.
Well, if you're an indigenous people, you do, but if you're not, you probably don't.
It's on my fucking calendar like 6 times because it just shows up on your calendar, It's Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day.
Well, if you're an
politically
Italian,
correct day.
Yeah, if you're Italian, you think Columbus was, the shit and a bag of chips, and if you're not, you don't. And but
wasn't he Spanish?
Yeah, well, no, he was Italian, but he came
worked for
here.
The Spaniards.
He came here for the Queen of Spain's dime, right? So all European. That's just, that's just more European conquest over indigenous peoples, which is something that we should talk about in the light of day and not try to rewrite
That's
history.
The whole history of the world.
Yeah. Well, germs, guns, and steel, right?
Exactly.
So, the book. So Travis and I are in the process of reading it. I think Travis might have clawed his way through that entire book. It's a book about, it really is a book that's trying to answer the questions, why do white people in this world have so much more than everybody that's not white?
I don't know that that's necessarily the thesis behind the book.
But it is part of the book. And because the question is asked at the beginning of the book, why do white people have more in general over the entire world than everybody else? And this book, and it's a tough proposition to try to explain that, and it's not easy reading. So, but look, here's what I was taught when I was a kid: whoever's on top probably acts the same way. It's not really a matter of what color you are, or what race you are, or what nationalistic tendencies you have. If you're the one on top, you probably act a certain way, and if you're the one on the bottom, you probably act a certain way. And those actions are probably driven by those positions, are driven by those positions in society or in life, and are not driven by the color of your skin. And I frankly believe that, and not everybody does. And I think we're going to have a deep dive now by society into some of the reasons why the Trump followers, the Trumpsters, why they feel the way they do. If we don't look at it, it's going to be a mistake, right? We need to understand it, right? We need to understand it, and we can only do that by looking at it through a clear lens, right? And not through the political spectrum. So
do you think that the racial tensions in this country will only calm down in the sense that, I don't mean racial justice and all of the, I think, things that are just spotlighted as a result of the last couple of years, certainly the last 2 years and this last year in particular. But what I mean is the divisiveness and the hatred, do you think that that'll simmer down now as a result of a change of power, or do you think that it's only going to continue to simmer in the minds of the people that are fueling this thing?
I think that there's a possibility that the country is posed on the precipice of exploring some of the systemic racism that's inherent in this society, whether that's in the police department or in the criminal justice system or in the government or whatever. I think that the George Floyd situation demonstrated to people that there is a very large multiracial coalition that thinks that shit needs to stop. And there's a lot of white people in that. And obviously I would think the vast majority of every person of color probably is on that side of it. Are there exceptions? There probably are. Don't bother to tell me about the exceptions. I don't give a shit. I don't care how many black people for Trump there are, or Puerto Ricans for Pence, or anything else. I don't give a shit. I think in general, people of color, and now, how does Obama put it? Now a large section of the white people they're woke now to this situation,
yep,
right? Listen, it's a matter of becoming aware and getting past the nonsense that you might be fed in your general locality. I've expressed a dislike for Southern states and Southern political outlooks and opinions, mostly based on the fucking terrible way that people in the South have treated people of color and blacks specifically since the end of slavery. And yeah, that's probably an incorrect broad brush. I'm sure there are a lot of woke white people in South Carolina.
Isn't that part of the problem, though, when we again put those people in those buckets? Do you think all Republicans are racist?
No, not all Republicans, just all white supremacists.
Yeah, that seems pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Here we have the inauguration tomorrow. So as we reflect back, do you think there has been anything good that came out of the last 4 years?
Well, that is a tough question. Wow. Well, I mean, some good things happened during the last 4 years. I don't think any of it has anything to do.
Not the Chick-fil-A that they put by your house, but
that's a good example of cognitive dissonance, to where I can eat a Chick-fil-A because it's really good, but I hate the fucking company because they're really bad.
Why are they bad?
Because the guy that owns them is a fucking bigot. He's a homophobic jackass. He's a far right wing religious nut.
I thought the Democrats liked him because he gave his workers Sundays off.
I don't know why. Democrats are far more secular than Republicans, so I don't know why we would like that. Although, frankly, there are a lot of religious Democrats. I mean, there are a lot of them. To my dismay. I mean, I live in California and in Orange County. You have to try hard to find any source of religious, other than the massive amounts of churches that are around. And so if you're not in church and you don't go to church, you probably don't feel much in the way of religion, right?
I think that's ultimately going to be what is the fundamental shift in this country, is the fall of religion. And when you look back at the document that binds this country together.
Oh my God! Some of your people are loading their fucking guns right now because you said that.
It's true. I mean, and I'm for it. I'm not a religious guy. I'm the guy that thinks the worms eat you. But the reality is that a lot of what has held this country together has been this basis of religion, and as that continues to deteriorate, then I think that's going to be the fundamental shift in this country.
Well, I think I've already said on our show that, I'm not in favor. I would not be in favor of religion disappearing immediately tomorrow. I think that, probably on the scale, religion does more good for societies than it does bad. Does it do bad? It does. Sometimes. I mean,
it's not going to disappear overnight, but I think it will on its own momentum.
Well, I struggle to understand people that live in just a world of belief and why they choose to live in a world of belief and be so adamant about it and so forth. I think that the religious political, and first off, if you're church is going to get highly involved in politics, they need to fucking pay taxes. Okay. That's all I'm going to tell you right now. If you want to stay out of politics, if you want to be non-political and just
what do you mean by involved?
Your God, all right, then stay the fuck out of politics.
What do you mean involved? What classifies your
involvement? If you're going to, as a church, as a religion, if you're going to stump for candidates, then you should pay taxes. Period. That should nullify your religious exemption from paying taxes, and that's it. Otherwise, become a political party and do all you want to do. I just think that that's just, but that's a gift that this country has given religious people, and I'm not looking to do anything negative against religion. When people that have religion are so pious that they want to force their viewpoints on me, then that's going to be a problem. That's never going to happen. And I'm going to fight against that. But, as far as I'm concerned, religion brings more good than bad to our society at this stage. right? So I think when we progress as people and have a better understanding that's less based in magical thinking and
It's all based in magical thinking.
Well, I think anybody that can even have a debate about stuff like creationism versus science, it's just ridiculous. I mean, this is 2021. We should not be involved in witchcraft and nonsense and magic, right? So one of the many things that we do agree on, Travis, and for those listeners that aren't there yet, that's fine. I don't think less of you for it, although I'm sure my comments sound like I do, but no more than, look, when I don't agree with the way somebody looks at something, I typically probably think less of their opinions. Doesn't mean I think less of the person, right? So, I mean, I know a lot of really, really good people that are highly religious. I know them in life. I know them in my family, and I would die for the right to continue to believe that stuff. And then I would also fight for my right to try to get them to understand the reality of some things, right?
Or just to tell them to leave you alone.
Yeah, and when that fervent belief in some type of religion affects how you base your political allegiances, I think that really works out as a good thing for society. So, having said that, that's
it's interesting. I mean, even the Democratic presidents in the past have been, or at least on the exterior, highly religious and profess their faith in God, and they take the oath and God bless America and all that stuff. And I'm not questioning that at all. Although I think you just said, and I agree, that there are, maybe fewer religious supporters on the Democratic side than on the Republican side. And it'll be interesting to see as we have more Democratic candidates and presidents as the country evolves, is the word I like to use, at how long they cling on to religion. Or the Christian religion, anyway.
Yeah, I think if there was something here's something I think we should put forward that you and I can think about and discuss down the road, since we're going to run out of our number one, topic generator in chief here pretty quick, is, maybe we should, as a society, maybe we should try to move toward the executive branch being wholly non-partisan and just nonpartisan, right? So, I mean, there are different agencies and institutions within the government that have always been nonpartisan, as much as Trump, in his effort to destroy every institution for the sake of destroying institutions, anything that's been supported or created by Democrats, he just ran out of time. Dude, that's another reason why 4 more years would have been disastrous. He would have had the time he needed to finish that job. Well, we may need to look at some things like maybe the presidency should be wholly nonpartisan, because really you have the Congress to represent both sides of the political spectrum, and you have the judiciary to enforce the laws, because this is a nation of laws, and that's all you need. You do not need the president to be partisan at all. The the NSA is supposed to be nonpartisan. The intelligence agencies are supposed to be nonpartisan. And are there people in them that have partisan beliefs? Everybody in them is probably a Democrat or Republican, one way or the other.
But this goes back to your point about the gatekeeping, and you're onto something here. But how do these people? I mean, you got to look at everything from campaign finance and how these candidates even get to be known in the public.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I mean, we need to take the money out of politics, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We need to take, Citizens United, and we need to kick back all of this stuff. We need campaign reform. And maybe, we need to, maybe the executive office should just be that, just be the guy that signs the law once the Congress passes it. And then,
what about we have the House,
the bureaucracy to carry out the will of the people, and that's it.
What about we have the House of Representatives, we have the Senate, we have the Supreme Court, and the executive office is filled by a robot? AI through the executive branch.
It would be better than the last 4 years.
Well, listen, my friend, I think we got to wrap up for today.
Yeah.
You didn't necessarily answer my question about the good of the last 4 years. Maybe that's telling in and of itself if there wasn't a whole hell of a lot of good. But we will say this tomorrow, or when this episode comes out, Inauguration Day of Joe Biden. And we will just say that, Mr. President, we wish you luck, and your success is our country's success.
Awesome. I have to agree with that 100%. So we're going to go out on a note of agreement. And
don't get used to it, folks.
Yeah, I'm going to wish the country and everybody good luck tomorrow.
All right, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.